I'm Grant Threlkeld, and this is my EDL 852 Module 2. When doing these interviews, the first question about the child find procedures, the biggest thing that I discovered is that other than the special ed teacher, there wasn't a whole lot of familiarity on how the child find procedures work within the school setting. That both the paraprofessional and the principal were familiar that there was something done at the early childhood levels, but not a whole lot done in the school level. And so the implications for me as a future educator is to be familiar on the processes and to make sure that my staff know what these processes are. When it came to the most challenging aspect of special education, the thing that I found most interesting is that the principal, the special educator, and the paraprofessional all mentioned aspects of communication. The principal specifically mentioning about how there's a cooperative who runs our special education department for the district that he's in, and especially when it comes to things like hiring paras, that he'll be approved to hire a position, have a candidate that he wants. And in one instance, this school year had to wait 3 weeks while there was some confusion over at the cooperative office onto who was taking care of what because some were going on vacation. And he felt the frustration because the students were not being served. And the paraprofessional and the special educator also felt the lack of communication and support from this particular cooperative in regards to um, only hearing information when it was you should have handled things differently. Um, and that got into ISTE standard 4C, which talks about communication through electronic measures. And that frustration, even though we have that technology, isn't necessarily being utilized in its most effective manner. But for all three, what they talked about being the rewarding portion is when a student is just seen as another member of the class, when students see successes. The special education teacher specifically mentioned when a student sees their own hard work pay off, that so often for these students that it's a struggle to to get them to where they need to be, and when they start seeing success in themselves, the pride that emanates from them is remarkable. The most rewarding part of working with parents, uh, the interesting thing for me was both with the special educator and the paraprofessional that they mentioned when a parent says thank you and really means it, when you know that they've made an impact in their life. The special educator uh, specifically mentioned how when their child had moved to a different program, they sent a video of their child throughout that past school year with the title of the best year of his life, and how much that meant to the teacher knowing that the parent recognized the efforts that had been put in that particular year. And the implications for me is it seems to be the consensus amongst these three people who have been interviewed that the relational capacity is the most important. Building those relationships with families and getting them to trust us and us to trust them so that we can have open and honest conversations. And when asked about what was the most rewarding part with working with other uh, staff members, it was again seeing the success in students that most, if not all, teachers got into teaching in some regards because they care about kids. And when kids are making growth, that's what matters. When it came to advice on supervising staff, the principal viewed it as a distributed leadership opportunity of kind of getting things off of his plate and empowering the professionals to be able to make the decisions that they made, which I found to be different than the special educator who mentioned that for her, she was doing her best to keep students away from the principal's office, because the minute that they went to the principal's office, then usually there was a follow-up conversation with the special education teacher of, well, when are we going to write a plan for this? And sometimes her perspective was is that sometimes kids are just kids. They have great days and they have not so great days, just like adults. And so that was a frustration for her. The impact for me is I would want to be more on the side of the principal and empowering staff members to be able to make decisions, but then also being able to have that open communication and being able to follow up with them on what could be done better, both on my end and on their end. When asked about how to effectively work with parents of children with special needs, overall, the consensus was to be positive with parents. The para had a little bit less to say because she felt that she had to follow up with what her special education teacher or administrator was giving them, but to always be positive. And that was the consensus amongst the three of them, was to be positive. But both the principal and the special educator mentioned that parents need to be heard. They need to be empathized. That we may have them for 8 hours a day, but the parent has them for 24. And so sometimes they just need somebody to say, you know what, I understand that there's been a tough day. The special educator did mention, however, that one of the difficulties can be trying to help a parent realize that their child is not like other children. She specifically mentioned a child with autism who liked trains but was approaching the upper elementary grade levels. He was approaching third grade, and the parent didn't want him playing with toys that his peers would play with, so took away all of his trains, which then led to some issues at school because the child was mad and would come in immediately venting and wanting to have his trains back. And that was a hard conversation for mom in that regards. When asked about how to work with the regular education staff, it was the main consensus that it's all about the relationship. That the regular educator and the special educator need to meet in the middle and be able to see how they're both working towards a student's success. That the means may be different, but they're both there for the student's success. The paraprofessional was the only one that brought up something different, and she brought up specifically about the independence of students. And that to me is the important one, that we need to be teaching all students how to be independent. That yes, especially at the early grade levels, it's easier to want to coddle, but to continue to push the students towards being independent because it pays off in the long run. When it asked for advice for a first year administrator, all three basically said to have flexibility and get to know the staff in the building before implementing changes, and when implementing changes, to talk to the staff because there may be a reason why something is being done. The para brought out about the importance of stressing inclusion and looking for opportunities for the children with exceptionalities to be included in the regular education class. The implication for me is to go in with an open mind and be able to work with the staff. When asked about to describe the relationship between the SPED staff and the administrator, um, there were lots of different opinions. This was the one where I had the greatest difference in opinions, with the special educator wanting to keep uh, students away from the principal, and the principal and the paraprofessional both speaking about the importance of relationships. Specifically, this principal mentioning how he doesn't have a background in special education, and so therefore he relies on the special education staff to let him know what he should be doing. But he did mention that communication is the key because